Now, the conversation already exists. I'm not the first person to note there's a problem here, right? The conversation does exist. And what we tend to do sometimes is go to reinvent wheels. Get on the internet, look it up, see what groups are already dealing with this, find out what can happen, become educated. You know, in the principles of nonviolence, that's one of the first things you want to do, educate yourself. Educate yourself on, you know, the last Pope, John Paul II, is that who it was? He apologized for the Inquisition, which was a big deal for women. I was surprised it didn't get more coverage. He apologized for the burning of the witches. And many of us carry in our cellular memory, and that's why we're afraid to speak our minds, because we have a cellular memory of a time when we were killed for doing so. But the Pope apologized for the Inquisition, and he called it purification of memory. He said the problem for not apologizing for the mistakes is that until you do not realize with your conscious mind when you are repeating it. So the issue of Hawaiian subjugation with, you know, Liliuokalani and all that, the issue is not just what happened then. The issue is realizing how many of the economic policies in the state reenact the subjugation day after day after day. This is the serious conversation. For instance, when we talk about reparation to African Americans, going back to Jews after World War II, darn right there were reparations, as there should be. So what happens in the United States is that many formerly subjugated people are no longer being subjugated externally, but there are still social and economic policies which perpetuate the situation. Educate yourself, become smart. Do you see what I'm saying? And then Spirit will guide you to what piece of it is yours to handle. This is what grown-ups do. This is what grown-ups do. We feel the sheer force of the emotion, but we can't stop there. We have to educate ourselves. That's why I say about Occupy Wall Street, keep it smart, keep it nonviolent, and keep it growing.
What did you say about Detroit? What was that called?
Detroit?
Yeah, you mentioned the racial stuff there.
Well, a lot of because Detroit is the most racially segregated city in the United States, but it's also the city where the most powerful work is going on racial healing, particularly among spiritual and metaphysical groups. So I don't know what exists in Hawaii. My guess would be there's already, that's the first thing you want to do. Do your research, find out. I mean, with all the young people, I mean, there's just no way there's not already, whether it's on the social issues, economic issues. First do that. Don't go reinventing wheels. I know people who, every time they get excited about something, want to start their own 501c3. That's not the most mature response sometimes, right? Rather, see what work is already going on and ask God to lead you and ask Spirit to guide you where you could be of service. Does that make sense? But your passion is commendable. But remember, when we, especially for women, there's a difference between emotion and emotionality. And we have to find that place within ourselves where we're simply having an intelligent conversation. Does that make sense? And I think it's beautiful that you care so much. Yes. Yes.
You spoke very well about how each of us individually have kind of gone through our course and we know what to do.
Yeah.
The challenge I feel and share with friends is that the complexity of the bigger problem is huge, and so there seems to be a gap. And you know,
the bigger problem meaning the planetary situation?
Yeah,
okay.
Or even at a state level,
okay.
Or whatever.
Okay.
But then you know, inside, intuitively, I know, and from my research as a scientist, that there's a way that an individual, when they do their passion, that somehow they come together in some mysterious process and solve problems that they actually don't know how to solve.
Okay, you brought up some really interesting things. First of all, the problem is not that complicated. The symptoms of the problem are complicated. The problems are actually not so complicated. You've got 1 billion people on this planet. They're called the bottom billion. They live on $1.25 and less a day. I visited Kibera, the largest slum in Kenya. 2 million people living in an area 2 square miles. 400 people, 1 latrine. After watching your child die of hunger, imagine the horror of watching your child die of diarrhea. Okay? All right. And you go to all these conferences and they wring their hands what an intractable problem poverty in Africa is. No. Jeffrey Sachs, economist at Columbia, has established, and no serious economist has argued with this, $100 billion spent over 10 years, we could eradicate deep poverty. 100 billion, which is 1/7 the defense budget of the United States every year. 100 billion, 1/7 of the defense budget of the United States. Is that right? 700 billion, yeah, okay. Every year. We could spend that over 10 billion and eradicate deep poverty. Now, they want you to think it's so complicated. No, it's not. It would be over if the Western industrialized nations decided it was going to be over now. That's when it would be over, when it was decided that it would be over now. So, what you've got is a situation, as I said earlier, where we are now using economic principles to order our civilization. Now, things will continue the way they are until we shift into humanitarian principles ordering human civilization. The Course in Miracles says, you think without the ego, without the ego all would be chaos. But I tell you, without the ego all would be love. So if we said, no, that's one thing that our right-wing friends do. They ask for what they really want. We, progressive thinkers, whether it's progressive spirituality or progressive politics, we ask for these incremental changes. And Martin Luther King, in his speech from a Birmingham jail, talked about the dangers of incrementalism. If you just ask in increments, then the status quo will always co-opt the change as you go along. And one of the ways they do that, it's just so complicated. And then they really paternalistically pat you on the head. And I know that you don't understand all that complication, but we who are the experts and we understand it, we will take care of this. See, these are the games. These are the games. And that's why those of us who are involved in all the spiritual and psychological, emotional changes, we can figure out what's really going on there. Do you see what I'm saying? Even with the Democratic and the Republican Party. You know, you've got one major political party in the United States who sees all the unbelievable suffering created directly, if not indirectly, if not directly, by our own social, economic, and political policies. And they go, well, it's not government's job to fix it, even though the irony is that government created a lot of it. But it's not government's job to fix it. And maybe private charity can do that. Maybe the churches could do that. As though private charity could compensate for a lack of social justice. Then you've got another major political party that says it's really terrible, all that suffering. And they do what they can to tinker around at the edges and the periphery, save a few people here and save a few people there. But at this time in our history, is not any more willing than the other party to challenge the underlying forces that make all that suffering inevitable. And that's when the people need to take it from here. And the people, when we take it from here, ask for what we really want. And when people talk about how, if they want to, it's like they say, well, where are we going to get the money? If you talk about humanitarian things, if you talk about the things that people need in order to thrive, and you ask for these things, they'll say things like, where are we going to get the money? Well, if you say we need to go to war, they don't say, where are we going to get the money? And if you ask for fixing the planet so that we've got a sustainable future, they say it's very complicated. But if they want to wage a war, they don't say it's just too complicated. They say we get the best generals in here and we give them what they need. Well, let me tell you something. There are geniuses on this planet. Some of them might be in this room because our generation has grown up now. You name an area, whether it's environmental area, technological area, diplomacy area, peace-building area, we now know what to do, and in every single area, there are geniuses who are already demonstrating best practice techniques. What they need is some of the funding and the resources that is now given to all that complicated work of waging war. Now, this is what the Course in Miracles would say. On a spiritual level, there is a central intelligence. So if we say, dear God, because the Course in Miracles says, you can't know how you could best fit in. You can't know, I can't know, you can't know. None of us can know individually how our efforts would best serve the whole plan for the salvation of the world. And remember, the word salvation is an interesting one. We tend to associate it only with traditional Christianity. But it's metaphysically incredible. The Course in Miracles uses it all the time. Salvation. The only thing to be saved from is our own odd, fear-based thinking. That's what we're being saved from. Gandhi said the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. So from a spiritual perspective, we say, dear God, it's complicated. My mortal mind couldn't possibly figure it all out. And even if my mortal mind did figure it out, how would I get people with me? The Course would say, you just do what I'm asking you to do today. And trust that if you do that, you will be playing your part. If you're just in every situation, arrive where you are, be open, everybody you're supposed to meet, everything is supposed to come to you. As long as your mind is open, you're not judging, you're available, you're showing up, then not only will you be able to then receive everyone and everything, every circumstance that could lift you, but then, like you were saying, other people vibrating at the same higher level will then be, y'all will find each other, you'll be assigned to each other. Now, that person who might be in concert with you, someone with whom you could both take it higher, you won't meet them if you're still so in your stuff that you're not available to the moment, so they don't even want to talk to you at dinner. Does that make sense? So it all gets into, you know, when you look at abolition, you look at women's suffrage, you look at the civil rights movement. They didn't have the money. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have the government on their side. They didn't have any of the material forces of the status quo. What they had was a better idea. They had the life-affirming, life-sustaining idea. And so they had what Martin Luther King called cosmic companionship. So that's all we have to worry about. You don't have to worry about, just show up, be open, available, surrendered, how can I help? Didn't you write a book called How Can I Help? Ram Dass, ladies and gentlemen. Because I was going to say, I read this book once. Wait, he wrote it. All you have to do is read Ram Dass and you know everything that you possibly need. And many of us did and do. Does that answer that question? And you know, the Course in Miracles says complexity is of the ego. And that's one of the ways, the obfuscation, oh, it's complicated. It's complicated. And that's one of the ways used by the ego to shut us up. Well, it might be complicated, but what's simple is you're waking up every morning, being in this moment, the woman or man you're capable of, in the next moment, the woman or man you're capable of, the next moment, and we do our best. And we're sent people. All relationships, the Course in Miracles says, are assignments. By the way, for those of you who are interested, in February 17th, I'm doing a workshop in Los Angeles. It's all about romantic love as a container for the spiritual journey. But in terms of the entire panoply of human experience, the Course in Miracles says all relationships are assignments made by the Holy Spirit, where two people coming together in whatever way are brought together because there's a maximal learning opportunity. So there's a plan. You know, God has an answer to every problem the moment it occurs. There is a divine plan for turning the Titanic around. None of us could rationally figure it out or design it. But all of us can show up as best we can as the people we're capable of being, practicing the principle, and in a plan that goes beyond our mortal understanding, we will be led to the people and situations where we can get these things done. We can part the Red Sea. We can turn the ship around. Does that make sense? Yes, sir.